Welcome to Explorers of Spirituality, where we explore spiritual concepts, the nature of reality, and energetic healing with
Brooke.
and Christine. Welcome back. In this episode, we are talking about money, relationships, how we impact others by being an example, as well as how our beliefs create our reality. And we're going to get right into it as we start. I think also being an example is something like that motherhood had taught me a lot because everything I do, I have to, like, I do it for myself too, but also, like, I know somebody is watching me.
Mhm.
And that was also another thing when I was in my old job was like, if I'm doing this job that I hate, I'm like teaching another generation that this is how life should be. Like you should have this like 9 to 5 job to make money, to pay your bills. And you have a little bit of time on the weekends or after work where you can do something you enjoy, but the main part of your life is doing something you actually don't like. And I didn't want to set that example. I wouldn't want, like, a lot of times I ask myself if I'm not happy about something or when I'm in a situation where I'm feeling like maybe there's another option. I try to imagine like if my daughter was in that situation, would I want this for her? Or you could also like look at your inner child, right? Like,
Mhm.
do you really want your inner child to like go through this or to live life this way? And it doesn't mean like obviously every undesirable experience is bad because it all teaches us lessons. But when it's about like big things like how you live your life, right? Like
Mhm.
the job you work or whatever the impact you might make, I don't want it to be like do something that makes you miserable, even though like I wasn't miserable in my job, but I didn't like it. Like it wasn't great. And I wouldn't want that
Mhm.
for my daughter. I want her to do something she actually loves and to find what would give her joy that she can do.
Mhm. I love that. And hearing you say that perspective makes me wonder if that's why I was so against and felt so strongly about not going to college and not working a 9 to 5 is because I watched my dad, work his whole life doing something he hated and how much it destroyed him and how much it also impacted not only himself, but the family as a whole. And just watching someone have to work, and even though they make good money, being miserable, it's not a way to live. And maybe seeing that growing up is what caused me to resent it so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see how that impacts everyone around you,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And also like if you grew up with money because like your parents worked or your dad worked a lot, like do you feel like it has it given you what kind of perspective does it give you about money and how money is earned?
Money can't buy happiness, only moments of temporary satisfaction. It shifted my perspective on how money's earned, making it seem like to make a lot of money, you have to work long, draining hours doing something that probably doesn't light you up and that drains you. Which, as I got older, this was such a limiting belief that I had to work around, and I could realize that I can make a ton of money doing something I love, and it doesn't have to be something that I'm miserable doing for the rest of my life to make money and to make a living.
Especially if you're like if you're doing something that you're
Mhm.
not enjoying, right? There are people who bring in lots of money and they do stuff that they love.
Mhm.
And I wonder too energetically, right? Like we put so much meaning to money because it affects a lot of things. Like you have to pay for your rent or for your mortgage and for food and like the necessities to live, right? You need money for that. So it is part of our society and part of how we live. But really like just money itself is like that, like a neutral frequency really when you think about it. But we have so much emotions around money and
Mhm.
so much history with it, right? And I think also the way you bring in the money could affect like how it affects your life, right? Like if you're bringing it in doing something you love, um, I don't know, I would think then you're more likely to also spend it from the heart in a way. it has like that heaviness if you're like just like working and doing something you don't enjoy. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about it. Might not be how everybody sees it.
Mhm. But no, I totally agree with that. I feel like if you're working and doing something you love, like you'll spend the money on things you love or maybe investing in yourself or in healthier ways
Yeah.
rather than spending your money on drugs and alcohol and all these things to cope from everything you're feeling.
Yeah. And a lot of times, like, money isn't necessarily like the ultimate thing, right? Like,
Mhm.
I mean, yes, you can buy things and you can support other people with it. Like, you can do good with it. You
Mhm.
can also do bad with it,
Mhm.
whatever, like, however you want to look at it. Um, but ultimately, you might, to live, you need not necessarily like all this money. I feel like you can live happily and um like not be a millionaire necessarily. There's also nothing wrong with being a
Mhm.
millionaire. Like, I'll take it.
Yeah.
But I think like when I think about my life, right, and like the money that I need to where I feel like there will be no struggle with it, it wouldn't have to be $1 million necessarily that I need to make for that. And that like depends on everybody's goals in life, right? And how the lifestyle they want to live. But like you said, that goes back to like how money can't buy happiness. Because sometimes we think, oh my God, if I just had this one thing, I'll be so happy. And then when you think back, like, I mean, I'm sure like everybody has had those
Mhm.
times and where they actually bought that thing. And then after a while, they were like, oh, it's actually like maybe you even became unhappy with it, or it turned out to actually be really crappy.
Mhm.
But where it was like maybe a short-lived happiness. And this is different, I think, from like having enough money to pay your bills. Like, I feel like that's kind of like the what you should have, right? Too,
Mhm.
because otherwise you have that stress. But like above that, when you want something so badly, and then you actually have it, like, I don't know, a new phone or a new car or something. Like
Mhm.
it's exciting at first, and then after a while it goes away, and it's like, now I want something else.
Exactly. Just that temporary satisfaction.
Mhm. Yeah, this is your money advice from the middle class. Actually, so I'm in Human Vibrations Discord, like
Oh,
their Patreon, and they have like a Discord chat thing. And she has her podcast with Rambo Seeking the Truth, or I think that's his name.
okay.
And he was recommending this book that he started about money magic. And it's like these rituals that you do,
Mhm.
but it's not like these normal rituals. Should I get it real quick and show you? It's
Yes.
like, so the ritual is like, it's this picture, and there's a very specific way on the feelings you have to feel before you start it. Like you're supposed to feel like a situation where you didn't have enough money and then focus on that feeling. Like if at one point in your life there wasn't enough money to buy food, right? Like maybe when you were a kid or something, then you should focus on like that feeling of hunger and like how hungry you were. And then you alchemize that feeling into like the feeling of something that you want right now and how happy you're going to be. Like let's say it's a vacation, right? Like you picture yourself like visualizing being on that vacation and like what you're going to do and how happy you're going to feel or whatever. And then you like look at this picture that I just showed you in a certain way. Like you have to look at one row and then the other row and like,
Okay.
and then you say like these like 5 words or something, which are like some of it are angel names. I don't know if they all are, but it sounds like some of them are angel names. I don't know about the other ones. I just got it yesterday.
Oh, I love it. This is so cool.
Yeah, and then you feel neutral. Like after you've done all of that, you kind of change that feeling. Well, you've changed it to gratitude first and then kind of
Mhm.
neutral to let it go and you know you're done with it.
Mhm.
And you do this 11 days in a row, and then you kind of like don't do it anymore for a few months. And then like every 3 to 4 months, you can do it 3 times in a row, apparently. So I'm gonna start today and then do it for 11 days. They say like you shouldn't expect it by a certain time. Like you shouldn't like set these expectations that
Mhm.
like, after 11 days it will happen. Like it says on there, it could take up to a year for something to
Okay.
come. But I did like, it's kind of strange. Like I looked up the author and I can't find anything on him
Hmm.
except for book reviews on these. Like he has a whole series from this.
Okay.
There's also some on angels and stuff. Because it was like, this is like weird magic stuff. um, but it seems, I don't know, I don't feel like a weird energy from it when I've
Mhm.
read through it and look at it. It's really mostly like how I already visualize and how I already would man like when I told you about the thing on my back.
Yes.
It's similar to that, right? Where you're just feeling those feelings. Except that here you have like that picture there where you're reading,
Mhm.
where you're looking at those words. But yeah, I don't know. I'll
I
let you
love that. And I love how it's so body based, going into the body, feeling it.
know. Yeah, so I'm curious to see.
Yeah, I'm curious too. I might need to read that after you.
hmm Yep. If it yeah, I'll let you know what happens.
Yeah, I'm gonna need it.
hmm Yeah, it's pretty cool. There are lots of YouTube videos of people reviewing it, like tons of them.
What's it called again?
It's called Magical Riches.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
but I had it open earlier and I had the windows open today because it's finally like the first day where it's a little cool outside.
Mhm.
And it opened it to, let me find the page. If I can find it now. There's a page, this one, like this picture of which I'm thinking it's for Archangel Raziel.
Okay.
Anyway, my cat was like laying on it for a really long time. I'm like, that must be good, a good sign, right? Like that must be good
Yeah.
energy that she's like laying on
Laying
this
on it.
picture.
Yes, definitely. She
So,
feels the energy from the
mhm,
symbol. Yeah, that's something that I realized is the more healing, the deeper I go into my own healing, how all the patterns that I play out are so much connected to generations and generations behind me, my parents, my grandparents, and like watching them play out the same patterns. Or even when I ask for advice on something, they can only give me advice through the lens of which they've experienced it. And that was the thing with my breakup. My family was not really supportive of it at all. And even thinking on why it was so hard for me to leave, and then it goes into the same thing with the relationship of my parents, their parents, and how it plays out and their lens and views on it. And so I really just had to have more empathy and understanding of where her view was coming from on why she wanted me to stay so bad. And it all ties to generational trauma.
mhm. And I feel like relationships are such an interesting one too, right? Because like you said, it goes back to generational trauma and like the lens you said earlier, the lens of what they've experienced is what, I mean, anybody can give you advice on, right? It's always through a lens of their experience and their beliefs. Um, and relationship, like with relationships too, and I see this like even in like my life too,
Mhm.
how like my mom and dad divorced also when I was young. I was I think first grade or maybe before first grade. And my dad was never really around. Like since like after the divorce, I would like only see him very rarely. And my grandma and my grandpa, they were married like their whole life, right? But they didn't have a good relationship either. Like they had a unhealthy, I mean, it just wasn't loving. Like it
Mhm.
wasn't, you never see them kiss or like they were together, but they didn't, like it was more like um just like for the purpose of like not having to start over on their own.
Mhm.
And I feel like in my own relationship, like it's not perfect. And like I wouldn't want to necessarily divorce or anything like that because like my husband and I we love each other. And but at the same time also like sometimes I can see like am I drifting into that direction like of my grandma and my grandpa, and then looking at like, kind of looking at it from a higher perspective, like, do I want to, like, how do we continue, like what are we going to do to make this work to where we're not repeating certain patterns. And then you have like all the trauma and baggage also from the other person in relationships too, and what they've gone through. And
Mhm.
so I don't know, I think it's like really interesting, relationships in general, but then also taking advice from other people, because everybody, like you said, has their own lens and their own experiences and traumas.
Mhm.
And like you, it sounds like you now went, like you went to your mom, you got advice from her, but you went and then took different action.
Mhm. Yeah, I had to sit on it for a while and like really think about it. And then it's so crazy how the universe, divine timing, all these things show up. That's when a few weeks later she had actually told me that story. And then I started to tie all the pieces together. I'm like, oh, maybe this is why you want me to stay in an unhealthy relationship. And I think sometimes it's better to walk away and choose yourself than staying in something that's so draining and so toxic. And it's so hard to do. It's so easy to say, but it is so hard to do.
Absolutely. And also, like, I wonder, right, like your parents having that relationship, and for you now being in a situation presented with, like, what do you want to do? Like, how life shows us, right? Like, you now can or could consider, like, do I want this, what my parents have? And this goes back to like being like the comfortable known, even if it's maybe uncomfortable at the same time because it's not desired. Or do you actually want to make a change, which is going to be really uncomfortable right now,
Mhm.
but then in the end probably will lead to a happier life for you, right?
Exactly. And that's a whole nother thing is realizing that this isn't normal. Like this is all you're used to your entire life. This is what you see as normal and you don't know anything else. And as I grow and, go out in the world and experience different things and different relationships and the way people act towards each other, I'm like, this is not normal. This
Mhm.
was just my normal, and I don't want this to be my normal anymore.
Yeah. And I think even from a like a bigger point of view, that's like anything, right? We can, like anything that we see as normal or that's considered normal by
Mhm.
society, right? We might
Mhm.
not even know there's a different way. I mean, I'm sure you knew like there's different
Mhm.
ways of having a relationship because
Mhm.
we're presented with that like in movies and through friends or whatever. But like a lot of times we have to question that, right? Like,
Yeah.
am I just doing this because it's considered normal, or is there a different way of doing things? And maybe there's like no example of doing things in a new way, right? But if it
Mhm.
doesn't feel, the normal way doesn't feel right to you, to kind of go with what feels right to you, and that might be something completely different. And how do you feel about, I know like this is still pretty recent, but how do you feel about following your own advice and your intuition over
Mhm.
like your mom's, or, what other people may
Mhm.
have told you to do or shown you?
It's been very challenging, and it's something that I've had to slowly teach myself to do and really notice when I'm trusting my gut or my intuition and making a decision from that and seeing the action of how it plays off. Um, like when I decided to, take my own advice and leave the relationship, things really started to get better for me and more opportunities started to open up. And my whole life, I've always been told by other people, who I am, what I should do. I was very controlled by my family for the longest time. So stepping in and trusting my own voice has been so hard. But just the little steps, the little nudges when I hear it and taking action on it and seeing the reward or seeing the safety that was in that and just noticing how good I feel after, I'm like, that's all that matters. I followed my intuition, I did this, and everything was fine. And a recent example of this was we had a hurricane, Category 5, coming to hit us. It's supposed to be the worst hurricane to ever hit Florida. And I was in Zone A, which was mandatory evacuation. And everyone's telling me, all the news is saying, if you stay, you're gonna die, all this stuff. Everyone's texting me, you're literally killing yourself if you stay in your apartment, you need to leave. And I just had this strong feeling in my gut that this was the safest place for me to stay. And 2 days of people telling me, leave, get a hotel, fly out. I was like, nope, I'm gonna trust myself. My gut is telling me to stay. I'm gonna stay. And unfortunately, a ton of areas did get hit pretty bad. My area, no flooding, no trees falling. We had power within 2 days. It was out for a while, but it came back on. So it was like little moments like that where I trusted myself and everything was okay. And it's like moments like that. And I just need to keep reminding myself of those moments when I chose to trust myself rather than what anyone else said. Because if I left, I could have, got stuck in the road, been in a worse area, who knows? But just trusting yourself and taking action and reminding yourself of the results that you get is so powerful.
I love that. And that's so true. And like with something like that, like that's a really big accomplishment for you to kind of like shut out the outside noise
Mhm,
and just tune into what feels right for you. Like
mhm.
this is like a big one, especially when it's like, oh my God, you're not going to be safe because, safety is like one of our primal needs.
Yeah.
And to still kind of just like tune into yourself and knowing that you're going to be fine.
Hmm.
That's amazing.
Thank you. Work in progress.
Hmm. And I know I had reached out to you before and asked like if you're gonna be okay with
Mhm,
that or not. And I remember you saying, "Oh yeah, we're always fine with hurricanes." And I do think like that too, like that mindset and
mhm.
kind of how you're convinced, like, yeah, we're gonna be fine. Like that potentially also manifests that, right? Like that
Mhm,
reality that it's all gonna be okay.
mhm.
Um, and I feel like with this Hurricane Milton, right, was
Yes.
insane. They did so much of like trying for people to manifest the worst outcome. Like you
Yes.
could see everyone was talking about it, how bad it's gonna be, and just like putting that into people's mind. And I think
Hmm.
weather in general works a lot like that.
Yes.
Um, like even with like regular rain or something, people constantly checking their apps for the weather.
Hmm.
I personally don't really ever look
Yeah.
at the weather unless like it's something where I need to know, like in Germany, for example, like I check the weather there because when we're on vacation,
Mhm.
because the weather can range from like rain to really hot to like kind of cold, and you need to know like what to pack when you're going out. But like here, I never do. But with this Milton hurricane, I feel like they did a lot of these projections and like where they would show on the screen, like this is how high the water is gonna be, which like makes it so much easier than to manifest that because you're
Hmm.
already seeing that picture of like the flooding and the destruction, which is even more powerful than them just like saying there's going to be so much destruction. They're now showing you like computer generated images of what
Yeah.
the destruction will look like, which is like crazy. And I really believe that we create so much of our reality
Hmm.
and our experience, right? And there are so many examples of that being the case. And I think like even though like there's that collective reality, like you for yourself can still kind of like create to where maybe that would be where it's the least impact, right? Like even if
Yeah.
it had hit right there, you would have still been fine, right?
Hmm.
So I think it's super important what we focus on, what we put our attention on, because that truly has such a big impact. And if you're not like, if somebody who's listening who's not doing that already, you can try it out with something like really
Hmm.
simple. I mean, just get up one morning and keep on telling yourself what a shitty day it is and how everything just goes wrong. And you'll notice how you get really annoyed more easily. Or like when you're having a bad day in the morning, right? You're like rushed and your sweater gets stuck on the door handle and you've spilled something or dropped something, and it just gets worse from there if you give that so much energy. Whereas like if you wake up and you just tell yourself today's gonna be a good day, or and you focus on the good, even if you spilled something or whatever, right?
Mhm.
It changes like how you experience the day, even though sometimes like the same thing might happen, the way you look at it and like
Mhm.
your thoughts about it can truly like shift the reality you experience. So it might not
Yes.
necessarily be that it completely changes. Like if I'm thinking I'm living in a mansion, like in my house might not now transform into a mansion today, but it's like I can feel happy in this house, right? Or
Mhm.
I can have a good day regardless of what's happening around me if
Mhm.
I choose to look for the good. Like if I choose to look outside and like be grateful for the sun that's like warming my skin, or the butterfly that's flying by, even if maybe something crappy happened earlier.
Exactly. And what feelings of living in that mansion would that give you?
Exactly right. It's like I personally wouldn't want to live in a mansion because I'd have to clean all of that, or you'd have to pay somebody to clean it, I guess. But
Mhm.
like it's like if you're thinking like it's something super physical, like it's gonna transform just by you thinking about it one time, that might not happen.
Mhm.
Um, but maybe like if you keep on thinking about how grateful you are for your home, like maybe you will end up like moving into a different home if that's your dream or whatever. But like I think it all starts with like your current reality and your current feelings about that reality, that can impact what you keep on experiencing.
Mhm.
I don't know if I'm explaining that.
No,
Did it make sense?
that makes so much sense. When I used to work at Home Depot and I still lived in this apartment, didn't really enjoy life at the time. And I like didn't enjoy this apartment. Everything, I just focused on all like the terrible things, and everything was just like worse and worse. Everything in my apartment was breaking. I would never have nice neighbors. The people in the leasing office were so mean to me. And then when I was able to really change my perspective and be like, oh, I'm so grateful, I live on my own, I live close to the beach, I have a roof over my head, I have air condition. Things started to get better. And then anytime there was something that broke, like maintenance would come and fix it right away and it'd be good as new. And then when I'd walk in the morning, all the neighbors would be like, good morning. And so it really is like what you focus on gets stronger.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think like your attitude too, right? Like when you have that more positive attitude, like the way you're gonna interact with like the leasing office
Mhm.
like, will be more positive as
Yeah.
well. And they will be able to feel that too. They can feel like that energy that you're sending
Mhm.
out. And if that's like a kind of an angry energy, like it's less likely then they're gonna be nice in return. So I think like we can just impact so much. And I
Mhm.
also think though, like we truly are super powerful in changing the physical reality as
Yes.
well. It might just not be from like one second to the next, but it can, like with healing, for example, that
Mhm.
can happen. Like it can be from one moment to the next. And I don't know, I mean, there's so many different theories, right? Whether that's like called like quantum jumping or
Jumping
like
or
changing realities.
new timelines.
Yeah,
Yeah.
new timelines, that's a popular one. Or whether that's just like that we can transform one thing into something else.
Mhm.
And that goes back to your beliefs, right? And what's like presented as normal and not normal, but there are stories of people who have done things like that.
Mhm.
And I mean, just because maybe only a few people have done it, or maybe there's no record of it, like why shouldn't it be possible potentially, right? And maybe it's
Exactly.
delusional, maybe it's not.
But yeah, I truly believe when we change, our external world reflects that and changes. Whether we're jumping to a higher timeline or whatever it is, there really is some type of shift.
Mhm. And that's one of the, I talked about 7 habits of highly effective people before. And in their portion is about like the choices you make and how that impacts your life. And they give the example of a guy named Viktor Frankl, who was a Jew back in World War II, and he was, I think, a psychologist who was in one of the concentration camps. And and he survived it. And he talked a lot about how like he was in like the crappiest of circumstances. And the biggest thing for him was that he always had the freedom to choose how he reacts to a situation.
Mm.
um so like, and I don't know if I remember this correctly, but I think they did like experiments on him, like where he's awake and like, operating
Okay.
on bodies. And he would picture himself giving lectures in like an auditorium once he's out of there, and teaching people about how he got through this, and what he's learned from it. So he would visualize basically like surviving this and using his experience to empower people. And that's exactly what happened. That's
Mhm.
exactly what he ended up doing. And I think that's like such a powerful lesson to learn, because people a lot of times are like, oh, you're just toxic, positive, you're like saying everything is good when it's not. But it truly is your choice
Mhm.
to choose your reaction to something or how you want to feel about something. Even if it is like a really shitty situation, you still get to choose how you perceive it and how you want to react to it.
Yes, that is so powerful. And that really just ties everything together so well that we discussed today.
Mhm. Yeah, he's one of my, like, I feel like he was very, like, he also has a few books, and I read one of the books when I did the training, and it was really impactful to,
Mhm.
like, really look at my life and be like, okay, like, I'm complaining about things, but, like, really, it's, like, my choice to
Mhm.
complain. And it's my choice to be angry about things that I don't need to be angry about. I mean,
Mhm.
when you're angry about the way of the world, which I think is very fitting right now with like
Mhm.
politics, like with the elections coming up, and there's so many angry people, and there's so much stuff apparently going on in the world. And you can be angry about that. You can be sad about, like, you can have whatever emotion you want about it, right? But I always feel like unless you're taking action to change something, like
Mhm.
if there's a war zone and you want to donate, go ahead and donate. If you want to volunteer, like do that. But if there's nothing you're doing besides watching the news and complaining about it or talking about it or feeling bad about it, but like you're not taking action, then let it go. Like,
Mhm.
feeling bad about it is not going to serve anyone. That doesn't help anyone if you're just feeling bad